We have in our system currently a veteran by name list, a youth by name list, a family by name list, and a chronic by name list. They all function essentially the same way, so we're going to focus on the veteran by name list today. So the reason we're rolling this out is the by name list, new and improved by name list for veterans, helps us understand who is experiencing homelessness in our community, where this is happening roughly, if we can tell based on shelter enrollments, and how long has this been happening for. The beauty of this list is that it's much, much easier to use than our existing list. This brings a lot of information all into one place and lets us share notes across agencies and organizations. So this is what our by name list looks like. We're going to dig into this a little bit more as we go through this training, but just so you have an idea of what we're talking about. We have a search option. We can check based on their status, which we're going to dig into. And then for veterans, of course, we can search by program eligibility. So the idea here is that as a human being looking at an HMIS profile, you can pretty much figure out, is this person experiencing homelessness or not, right? You can look at, are they accessing street outreach? Are they in shelter? And until now, there wasn't really a way to bring all that together. So what we've done to identify those statuses is figure out different statuses that folks can be assigned based on their interactions with the system. So there's 4 different types of homeless statuses. The first one is newly homeless. So these are folks that have only had events in HMIS that indicate that they're experiencing homelessness, none older than 90 days. And we are going to talk more in just a moment about homeless versus housed events. Return from housed, they do have at least one homeless event in the last 90 days, but the event immediately before was a housed event. That could have been last month, it could have been 6 months ago, but before we saw them now, we had housed them. Return from inactive, we're seeing them now and we're seeing them before the last 90 days, but there's a gap of at least 90 days in there where we didn't contact them, we weren't talking to this person. And then just active. They're homeless now, they were homeless before, they're not returning from housed. These are folks we've got to house. There's only 2 non-homeless statuses. There's inactive, which is just they were experiencing homelessness last time we talked to them, but we haven't heard from them in more than 90 days. Or their most recent status is housed. So here are the events that count as homelessness. This is anytime you enroll into a program for folks experiencing homelessness. So shelter, safe haven, transitional housing, street outreach, all those enrollments, that counts as a homeless event. An enrollment into another program, if you're coming from a homeless situation, including fleeing domestic violence, that counts too. So even if it's just a services only enrollment, as long as we've got that prior residence in there, it's going to get pulled on here. Exits, any exit from shelter, safe haven, or transitional housing, that counts as a homeless event because we know that on that day, you were still in a program that meant you were experiencing literal homelessness. Or any program exit to a homeless situation also counts. If you're currently enrolled in shelter, you're going to pull in as currently in shelter. It's going to show you today's date. If you add a current living situation for somebody that indicates they're experiencing homelessness, that counts. Street outreach contacts, those count. So what you'll notice about this is not additional data entry. You're not having to do anything extra to get these things to register, right? You just need to do what you normally do with your clients. Enroll them in programs when they're in programs. If you know where they're at a current living situation. If you're doing street outreach, record those contacts. All these things that you already do, that's what this list is looking at. This is not creating additional work for you to do. Housed events, these are very similar. Any program with a housing move-in date, we'll grab that housing move-in date. If we have a program and we see they're paying rent for somebody, we'll assume that they have moved in. And there's just no housing move-in date yet because we aren't paying rent for folks that are unhoused. Same for deposit assistance. I'll pull that onto the list as a housed event. If you exit any kind of program to a housed destination, that counts. We know they were housed. If we have a current living situation, says they're housed, we'll pull that in. And just like we're pulling in current shelter enrollments for homelessness, we'll pull in current housing program enrollments with move-in dates for house jobs. So let's take a look at how this works in action. This is the dashboard that you see when you log into HMIS. Over in the left-hand menu, you'll see this by name list option. If you don't see this yet, it's because you don't have access to any of the 4 by name lists. If you should and you don't, just go ahead and submit a ticket and we'll go ahead and get that access added for you. We're going to go ahead and look at the veteran by name list. So we're going to click on it. I'm just going to take a moment to think. We're going to come in here and hit search. You'll notice that it automatically selected active, newly homeless, return from housed, and return from inactive. Anytime you load this page up, by default, when you hit search, it's just going to show you everyone that's experiencing homelessness. If you need a count, say, of housed folks, something like that, you can just change that selection. Or if you really want to zero in on who's returning from inactive or who's returning from housed, you can do all of that in this filter right here. This happens sometimes. This is just because this by name list is pulling in a ton of information from all across our system. If that happens, no big deal, just hit search again. Basically, you can think of it as every time you hit search, it pulls in a little bit more information. And if you just hit it a couple times, eventually you'll get your full list. You can also search by client ID or by name if there's a specific person you're curious about. If you're looking to make a referral, kind of figure out what that situation looks like, you can sort. Only show me folks that do have an open housing referral. And then, of course, if you're looking for folks that are eligible for SSVF, eligible for VASH, as verified by the VA, you can just check those checkboxes and then hit search again. Let's see. If there is a search option that is important to you that you think would be useful, again, go ahead and submit a ticket. We do have syncs in our system once a month. So once a month, I've got an opportunity to add in new filters. So if there's something that would be useful, just let us know. We'll get it added. The whole point of these lists is for them to get used. All right, so now that this is loaded, let's go ahead and take a look at the columns we've got here. We have the client name. Just remember, if you're looking for a specific person, you can always hit Control F and search for a specific name. Their client ID number, obviously important. Their date of birth and the last 4 of their social. This is really for verifying VA eligibility. Whether or not they have an open housing referral, so you can sort on that. Their current status. This is the same status that we filtered on up here. SSVF, HVAF, VASH eligibility right here. If they have any current enrollments, you're going to see that here. Let's see. Shelter enrollments are going to show up in red. Housing program enrollments are going to show up in blue. So it's really easy just to see at a glance. If somebody's got red program enrollment, you know exactly where that person is. Their identification date. So how long ago did we have their first homeless event in the system? Contact information. This will be all 3 phone numbers and their email address that get collected on that client information page. And then the most recent note. Most recent note, if you come in here and you click on shared notes, this is where you would go to add that note. Important thing to note, these are the same notes. You'll recognize these from the housing status tracker if that's a thing that your program uses. Same system. These notes are shared across agencies. You can come in here and add a note at any time. We'll go ahead and save. We'll return to our by name list. All right, also in the menu, we have View Events button. This is really the key to the whole list, honestly. One thing I heard a lot talking about the old by name list was that it wasn't clear why people were or were not on the list. So what we've done here is if you click on this View Events button, let's find a good example. Someone who's got a handful of enrollments. Let's go ahead and click on this person. So this is going to show us every event that's going into this status. So we see they have a literally homeless enrollment. We can see who added it. Literally homeless current living situation, who added it. Another literally homeless enrollment, and that they're still enrolled in programs. This really helps you narrow in on What are they experiencing and when? Here's another. We've got literally homeless enrollments from Wheeler since March, and then another one in June. So you can see they're continuing to experience homelessness to somebody labeled active. So if you see somebody on this list and you think they should not be on this list, or vice versa, if somebody is maybe listed as housed or inactive and you think that's wrong, come in here, click on this view events button, see what's missing. And if you think there's something that we should be checking for that we're not yet in building this list, let me know, we'll add it. This list is entirely customized, so we can add whatever rules we want to make sure that this is capturing information the way a human looking at this would capture that information. And then our last action button is just jump to client. So if you come in here, you see somebody, something looks a little funky, or they're missing contact information you have, you can just come in here, go to client, add it, come right back, and you'll see it added there. Last thing right here, this tells you the number of folks that are on your list. So right now, if I'm looking at veterans, searching for active, newly homeless, returned from housed, and returned from inactive for the last 90 days, I've got 314. This is the number that we want to watch as we're counting down. So those are the by name lists. Thanks for joining this training.